Welcome back to Our Issues Milwaukee. I'm your host, Andrea WIlliams. Our conversation this morning has been about homelessness in Milwaukee. More than 600 youth are homeless every night in the city. For over 40 years, Pathfinders has offered family-centered, strength-based programs to help those young people without a place to call home. My guest is Katie Hamm, who's the Vice President of Housing at Pathfinders. How are you, Katie?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Thank you for being here. It is a pleasure to talk about this subject today because I feel it's very important for people to understand how many young people really are in need of help. And Pathfinders has been there to help young people in this particular situation for many years. Tell us more about the organization and its mission.
Yes. Well, Pathfinders began in 1970 as a shelter for runaway, throwaway, and otherwise traumatized young people. And we still have a shelter program, which I know we'll talk about later on. Right now, Pathfinders focuses on wrapping around youth and their families in a way that supports the family staying together and reduces rates of youth homelessness in the city.
Yeah, because a lot of times that's the issue, a young person not being able to so-called get along with people in the house, and then they decide they're just going to leave, and that's really not the best decision because there are a lot of things out there that are not good for young people, and they could get caught in a lot of different scenarios that could be extremely dangerous. So I just mentioned one of the reasons why a young person may leave home. What are some of the other reasons why a person of young age would be homeless?
Well, there are many reasons. Family dynamics are certainly a major component of why any young person feels unsafe or doesn't want to stay at home. We have families in our city, and I know that you know this and you've covered this in other segments, but we have families that are under a lot of stress. That may be because of poverty, that may be because a parent is incarcerated. You know, of course, we have such a high rate of incarceration of African American males in our city, and that heavily impacts the family and the family dynamic. We have, even though the teen pregnancy rates have been dropping, we still do obviously have concerns about the rates of teen pregnancy in our city that can contribute. Also, we have parents who are parenting teens who've been parenting a long time and are suffering from the stress of that. We have youth who, because of histories of trauma, whether that be neglect or abuse or sexual trauma, have some fairly significant behavioral health and mental health issues that can put also a considerable strain on a family. And oftentimes within that family dynamic, there are parents or guardians or caregivers who are suffering from the same traumas that the youth themselves suffer from. Wow. Yes, and so that's very hard on families under the best of circumstances. So when you do throw in the impact of segregation and racism and oppression that many of the families in our community suffer from, it can be an unbearable strain on the family.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's a lot of people that never really looked at it from that perspective because unfortunately our society has an idea of who and what homeless people's scenarios are, but you just ran down a plethora of reasons why someone could end up in this situation. A couple other things. You've got mental health issues, which you touched upon, juvenile delinquency, drug addiction, and a subject that we've also talked about on this show is a lot of kids aging out of foster care. And once they do that, many of them don't have anywhere to go. So these are all scenarios that exist, but the good news is that Pathfinders is there with many programs and services to help these young people through this and get them on the right path. So you do run the Emergency Youth Shelter, as I stated. In 2013, 257 youth received emergency shelter care and supportive services, and 95% returned home or were placed within a safe living environment. Those are very positive numbers.
They
So tell us about the youth shelter program.
Absolutely. So the youth shelter serves youth between the ages of 11 and 17. Many of them coming to us, due to circumstances like the ones that I previously described. They can come to the shelter through any of a number of pathways. We might receive a call from a school social worker about a particular situation. Law enforcement may bring a youth to our door that was found sleeping in a place where it wasn't safe for them to sleep. Families will often call us, and youth on the street that know of us will also make a referral sometimes, although they wouldn't call it that certainly, but we'll talk about Pathfinders, and so youth will find their way to us. Once they're in the shelter, we provide them with all of their basic needs, obviously, first and foremost. Let them know that they're safe. We assess for safety. We investigate through an interview with the young person the reason why they're at the shelter. We'll oftentimes, in many cases, make an abuse report with the Bureau of Milwaukee Child Welfare on their behalf, and then we connect them immediately with the therapist, and so the therapist and the youth will then begin working on the issues that brought them to us. That always, when possible, includes the family, which is why our numbers for family reunification are so high. That young person can stay for up to 2 weeks, and within that 2-week period we will meet with the youth repeatedly. We'll meet with the family, have family sessions, and begin almost immediately working on a plan for a safe, permanent place for that young person to be.
Okay, and so what you found is that whereas maybe one-on-one family members are not able to communicate in order to live harmoniously, but with the help of counselors and having that communication open, it really does make a difference.
It absolutely makes a difference.
Yeah. So you have what's also called a drop-in center.
Yes, we do.
So how does that work?
So the drop-in center serves youth up to age 24, so youth and young adults, and primarily focuses on youth that, because of their age, would not be able to receive services from the shelter, for example. But it's a safe place for young people to congregate. So the drop-in center is a place where someone can come in. They can, again, get their basic needs met, but if that's all they want to do, then they can leave as soon as that has happened. They can get something to eat, they can shower, they can get a clean change of clothes, they can use a computer. We do have youth that will come in and use the computer for a job application, an online job application, or any of a number of things like that. And the drop-in center is unique in a number of ways because we've learned over the years that the youth seeking our services don't respond to a traditional therapeutic model, and so they're not going to come in and make an appointment to see a counselor on Thursday at 3 o'clock and show up every week, at that time. But at the drop-in center, because of the staff, because we do work with a number of universities and have talented interns that are there to interact with youth in a very informal way, so that what might feel to a young person or a young adult as a casual conversation is actually doing a lot more for them. And so 5 minutes here, 15 minutes there, we're able to build a trusting relationship, and over time, many of those young people who would reject a more structured environment find themselves actually becoming involved with a case manager and getting some very much needed services that way.
I think that's awesome. So homeless teens and young adults in Milwaukee face some of the most staggering odds in our country, combined with high rates of sexual assault and exploitation of young people, many of whom are trading sex for shelter. And that's what I meant earlier when I said there are some very dangerous scenarios that are out there. And so many times when people are at the point of destitution, they will do what they need to do to survive. But it becomes so very dangerous, especially when you look at human trafficking and how people of all ages are put not only out on the streets in the city, they travel. These people from state to state, and it could be traumatic for them for the rest of their lives.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, what we know, unfortunately, is that typically within the first 72 hours of being on the street, a youth is solicited for sex. And when a young person engages in survival sex, it is that kind of decision. It's about whether or not they will survive the night. And we have, as you know, the winters that we have, and someone offering a warm place to sleep in exchange for sex is a healthy alternative in that moment, because the only other decision might be to spend the night on the street where a young person may not survive the night.
Wow.
And so it's an unfortunate reality that youth who are homeless face on a nightly basis.
Yeah, you have some programs that continue to help young people along the way. You have Street Beat.
Yes.
And my understanding is that you kind of have an understanding of where youngsters who are homeless congregate and hang out. So you go there,
yes,
and you're able to help them.
Yes, that's absolutely what we do. And again, in many ways following a somewhat non-traditional model, but we're able to offer almost street case management through the Street Beat program. So we have some wonderful staff members who have very good relationships with youth who will not come to the shelter, youth who will not come to the drop-in center for any of a number of reasons, but who are homeless and will connect with Street Beats and get things that they need. Some ongoing case management, some information about how to stay safe. They'll get condoms, they'll get other things like that they need, and it helps them survive.
Yeah, and before we run out of time, I want to talk about this. A National Gay and Lesbian Task Force study that was released 3 years ago found that 20 to 40% of the nation's homeless identify as gay, lesbian, bisexual, or transgender. There are a number of kids that are out on the street as we speak because of their sexual identity. Talk about that.
Absolutely. It's extremely significant in the work that we do. Yes, we see that. So oftentimes a young person comes out to their family, or they're outed, and we see a lot of that where someone sees something or witnesses something and shares it with a family member. And maybe that youth was not ready to come out to their family. And when they come out, they experience rejection. And oftentimes when we have a youth who's coming into the shelter, we find over time that it's due to issues of either gender identity or sexual orientation, where the family is rejecting of the young person because of those things, and they're unsafe in their home. Wow. And those are some of the most difficult situations because the youth is being who they are, and they're being rejected by the very people who are supposed to keep them safe and love them unconditionally. Those are very heartbreaking circumstances. And I think it's something that we're very proud of as an organization, not only at the Drop-In Center, but at the shelter and across all of our programs. We see a disproportionate number of LGBT youth, but it speaks to the capacity of our organization and of our staff to be affirming of that young person's identity in all circumstances.
Yeah, and we have quickly run out of time, but I did want to mention that Pathfinders has merged with Rosalie Manor to also look out for young people in many different ways. And if you would give out your website address so that people can go to the website and get all the details on the different things that you offer on a daily basis.
Oh, absolutely. So www.pathfindersmke.org.
Thank you so much for coming by. It has been a pleasure talking to you. I appreciate all the work that you're doing.
Thank you so much.
Katie Hamm is the Vice President of Housing at Pathfinders. And for more information on anything we've discussed, again, you can log on to pathfindersmke.org or call 414-964-2565. And that is going to do it for today's show. I'm your host, Andrea WIlliams. As always, I thank you for watching, and I hope you join us again next week as we take another look at our issues, Milwaukee. Have a great day.